I'm Jonathan Gurwitz, partner with KGB Texas Communications, and welcome to The Point. Today we're visiting with Dr. Kate Rogers, the Executive Director of the Alamo Trust. I'm a lifelong resident of San Antonio. I've had friends visit from around the world. Everyone wants to see the Alamo. Everyone knows the Alamo, but it's always needed something more. And now we're doing that. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the state's investment, but we're here out on the plaza and want to talk about the Lunette and the Mission Gate, which opened in May. So let's take a look at that first.
Okay. The Mission Gate would have been constructed by the Spanish in around the mid-1740s while the church was under construction. And it would have served as the official entrance to the mission that later became the fort. In addition, the Lunette would have been added by the Mexican Army in 1835. So it would have been just like the palisade, a fortification of the fort to help protect the official entrance during the time of the battle. So this structure indicates what was originally what we call the low barrack, right? Everyone knows the long barrack, which was the convento, but the low barrack served as the hospital during the battle, and that's where most people believe that Jim Bowie was, because he was very ill in the time of the battle. So one of the things that's not out here yet, but will be soon, is the statue of Jim Bowie will be placed right here in the place where he would have been in 1836. The other thing that we placed inside of here are these models, and the models were actually part of the Phil Collins collection done by a really famous artist and Alamo historian, George Nelson. Visitors believe that the church is the Alamo. They don't understand that it was actually a whole community. But these models do a nice job of showing the evolution of the fort over time. And you can see all of the structures that would have been surrounding the Alamo Church back in the 17 and 1800s.
So we start with this historic investment that of $400 million that the state has made in the Alamo. That was a real game changer, right?
Indeed. So, as you mentioned, we've talked about doing something at the Alamo for as long as I've been alive. This is the first plan, though, that has garnered broad support from the city of San Antonio, the state of Texas, and Bexar County. The people feel very deeply about the Alamo, strong emotional attachment to the site itself. But thanks to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Land Commissioner Dr. Don Buckingham, we did receive an incredible $400 million appropriation during the last legislative session. There's been many changes to Alamo Plaza over the years, as you know. It's a very popular community gathering space, and we intend to honor that. So what's under construction to the south is Plaza de Valero, which would have been the plaza that sat outside of Mission San Antonio de Valero. This structure is actually really important. This is the southwest corner of the fort, and it does a couple of things, right? It shows you how big, the site would have been. It also shows you the height of the walls, so you can get a sense of what it would have been like to be a Mexican soldado and climbing over those walls to come into the fort. On top of the structure is the 18-pound cannon, very popular with our visitors, but also really historically important because that's the cannon that William B. Travis fired in response when Santa Anna arrived in San Antonio in February of 1836, and Santa Anna raised the red flag of no quarter at San Fernando Church at the time, and William B. fired the cannon to say they would not surrender. It also, just outside of that structure, would have been the home and the workshop of Toribio Lozoya. So you see the statue there. Toribio was the only Alamo defender who was born on the grounds and died here as well. So really important figure and not as well known. So we intend to honor those lesser known defenders as part of the project as well. Over here is kind of what we call the crown jewel of the Alamo plan. This is the new Alamo Visitor Center and Museum. Again, it'll be complete in 2027. Under construction now behind this giant scrim, which shows you exactly what it's going to look like. Up on top will be an event center with wonderful views, terraces on 3 sides. The museum will include 8 galleries. They're chronological in nature, so you start at the beginning of the story some 10,000 years ago when the first indigenous people inhabited this part of Texas, and then you'll make your way up through Spanish Texas, the Mission era, Texas under Mexican rule, the battle itself, of course, And then a couple of galleries that talk about what happened after the battle. So the United States Army first came to the Alamo in 1845. They used the Alamo as a depot. And so that's when the famous structure, that was the first time the Alamo had a roof. Because remember, in 1836, the church was never completed as a mission. So there were only a couple of the ancillary structures to the north that actually had a roof or ceiling on them, like the sacristy and the temporary sacristy. So the Army was the first one that put a wooden gabled roof on. It was pitched, and they added the famous parapet. That's the shape that we all know. We call ourselves Alamo City here in San Antonio, and that's the shape that we all know. That was also the beginning of San Antonio's evolution to become Military City, USA. And then we have a gallery that focuses on the preservation era, which would have been the 20th century, 1905, when the Daughters of the Republic stepped in to save the two structures. At one time, right, the convento actually had an entire structure on top of it. It almost looked like a store from New Orleans, from downtown New Orleans. So the whole area had really been encroached by commercial development. And Clara Driscoll and Idina de Zavala, very important women in the history of Texas, stepped in to save the structures.
You know, what's unique is that we've got this piece of living history in the heart of downtown San Antonio.
Yes. My favorite question from visitors is, why did they put it down south? Not realizing that the Alamo was here first.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that was the whole purpose of the Spanish missions, right, was to create a community. So there were normally three parts to a Spanish mission, right? You had the church, you had the presidio to protect the church, and then you had the development of the community. And here in San Antonio, that was actually led by the Canary Islanders, 16 families from the Canary Islands who arrived to actually settle this community. And that's, I'm a descendant.
Are you really?
Yeah.
So we talked about the state investment, and then the city and the county have put money in.
They have. The state gave $400 million, and that was not their first investment. There actually have been prior appropriations that actually helped to build the collection center and also to do a lot of research on what's happening with the church and the Long Barrack, both very fragile limestone structures with lots of movement of salt and water within the walls. So $50 million of the $400 million appropriation has been appropriated or set aside for the preservation of the church and the Long Barrack.
So city and the county, and then we've had
$62 million from private investment. Our goal is to raise $150 from private investment, so we're always out there looking for other contributors and people who want to invest. What we think is a legacy project.
So $550 million for the master plan.
That's right. And the master plan, I think when people say that, like, wow, that's an expensive museum. But I think it's important to remember we're not just talking about the museum. We're talking about the redevelopment of the entire historic footprint, all the way from Houston Street down to Commerce Street.
Well, let's talk about the economic impact.
Yes.
What does the Alamo mean to San Antonio?
Well, it remains the number one or number two, if you look at the numbers between the Riverwalk and the Alamo, highest visited attraction in the state of Texas. So we get about 1.6 million visitors a year that we record, right? That doesn't include people who just stop by to take their picture in the plaza and so forth. When this project is done, we expect that will be more like 2.5 million a year, which will be incredible for downtown San Antonio. It also represents about $12 billion in economic return to Bexar County, including the first 5 years of construction, which is the stage we're in now, as well as the first 5 years of operation.
Okay, now we're in the Ralston Family Collection Center.
Yes. So this building opened on March the 2nd of 2023, so we just had our 1-year anniversary a few months ago. We've welcomed about 350,000 visitors since that time. So lots of folks coming inside here. And this building was a game changer, right? It has 10,000 square feet of exhibition space that enabled us to increase the number of artifacts on display by 5 times over the tiny space we had prior. But it also importantly includes a state-of-the-art vault where the Alamo collection is now housed. As you know, it's really important in the museum world that you have a space where you can house the artifacts and care for them properly in terms of temperature, light, humidity, and the Alamo has never had that in its history. What you'll find inside are a number of artifacts from famed rock star Phil Collins, who generously donated his collection to the state back in 2014. By the time he gifted his collection to the state of Texas, it was valued at $20 million. And he had amassed one of the most significant collections of Texana in particular. But there's also a number of beautiful artifacts from the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, like the commemorative plates that you're seeing, and also from Donald and Louisiana, who are local to San Antonio and amass a really beautiful Spanish colonial collection. When the new museum is complete, most of the artifacts that you'd see and hear today will move across the street. Then this building will be used for temporary exhibitions, which we're really excited about it. So you mentioned earlier, unfortunately, sometimes locals feel like I've seen the Alamo, I've been there, I've done that. We want to give people a reason to come back. And so inside this building, we'll include exhibitions that we will curate ourselves. For example, during 2026, which is America 250, we're going to do a special exhibit focused on Bernardo Galvez, who was a very important general in the Spanish Army and actually led a cattle drive from San Antonio to Pensacola to feed the troops during the American Revolution. And so we're excited about telling his story. He's one of only a handful of people in the world, including Winston Churchill, that have ever been made an honorary United States citizen.
You've had foundations, families, businesses who have all come on board to help support the master plan and helping you reach that $550 million goal. Talk about the importance of that public-private partnership.
Honestly, we couldn't get the project down without both, right? The influx of funding we received from the state of Texas, incredibly generous, and then also the supporters. And there have been so many stops and starts with the Alamo plan over the years that it took people to say, it's important enough. I care about history. I care about this place, and I care about San Antonio, and so I'm going to invest. People are starting to see what's happening. They're getting excited, and we need that support. So one of the most popular items in the collection center is the Phil Collins diorama. Very large, but also comes with this great audio from him telling day by day what happened during the 13 days of the siege. It also helps visitors to really understand the size of the compound, the different structures that would have sat along the perimeter and so forth. It's been one of the most favorite things that people come to see here. If you think about what we know about the defenders, right? We know that they were not all from Texas, that they came from multiple states and even multiple countries. But this was well before the time of photography. Most of the men were too poor to have portraits done. So we know the big three, right? We know Bowie, Travis, Crockett. But we don't know as much about the other men. So we've been working with a forensic artist out of Houston named Lois Gibson and using photographs of descendants to create likenesses. So we can bring back these men, so we can see what they would have looked like. And when we present these images to the family, I can't tell you how much it means to them because they've never seen them. They've never seen them.
Some more collections?
Yes. So obviously when you come to the Alamo Museum, one thing you might expect to see is guns. Maybe some swords, some pistols, some knives, of course a Bowie knife, for example. Right. And so we obviously have a number of them in our collection. We're very proud. We now have 2 of Santa Anna swords in our collection. Wow. And so there's actually a really beautiful display inside the church right now that shows Sam Houston on one side, Santa Anna on the other, and the 2 swords are crossed. It is a battle that has captured the imagination of people from all over the world for many, many years.
Well, Dr. Kate Rogers, thank you for hosting us here at the Alamo today, and thank you for your leadership in this amazing transformation of the Alamo to make it what it should be, a world-class attraction.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys coming out today.
Thank you, Kate.